Well, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me. I need to stay back here, right? So I'll tell you a couple of things. One, my very first reception or event was in this facility. It was 4 years ago this month. So this week is my 4-year anniversary with Northern Kentucky Triad at that time, now BE NKY. So it's good to be back here. One of my first public speaking appearances was with the Florence Rotary in the summer of 2019, long before the COVID pandemic struck. So it's really good to be back in front of you. And yes, I did. I started my career in the private sector. So I grew up in Owensboro, Kentucky, west of here. I spent went to the Western Kentucky University, spent the first 25 years of my career in the private sector. Was kind of pretty happily sailing along when I got a call one day in 2013 that presented the opportunity for me to come into the economic development world. And then in late 2018, got a call that brought me down here for this role. So that's kind of what brings us here today. We've been on a 5-year journey for this organization. If you don't know, at the time, Northern Kentucky Triad is a 36-year-old entity, started in the late 80s by the 3 counties, Boone, Kenton, and Campbell. And the challenge then was really to address how do we grow the economy and how do we help companies find Northern Kentucky, and how do they help navigate the process of landing here. Through the years, they added on and did some different things, but about 5 years ago, the board was taking a look at things and being strategic and said, we really want to try to recreate this company and what economic development is for the current needs and what may be coming at us. Little did we know what was going to be coming at us. And so that process led to really pushing a complete restart on the company. New president, myself, entirely new staff, kind of new focus on the services that we're providing, and then culminating in this name change that you see behind me. And I'll tell you a little bit about the name BE NKY. While we chose this, we recognize that we're very blessed here in Northern Kentucky, Boone County, Florence. This is a very prosperous community, a very successful community, has been for a very long time. And as we were coming through COVID and we were thinking about what does the future of all of our community look like, it was really a positive message. It was really a message of, and what we honed in on was, how do we build and elevate this community? It wasn't about recreating or rebuilding or remaking or repairing something that had gone wrong. It was really about, we are a blessed and fortunate and prosperous community, and how do we build and elevate on that to ensure that we have that type of prosperity for coming generations. And so we love that build and elevate theme. That naturally for us migrated into BE NKY, and it allows us to talk about things. Who do we want to be as Northern Kentucky? What do we want our economy to be as Northern Kentucky? And so we launched this brand change, I guess it was last month. So that said, that kind of hits my central theme of what I'm going to share a couple of different points with you. But my central theme and what I want to share with you today is exactly that. We're a prosperous community, Northern Kentucky, Boone County, Florence specifically. We've been a prosperous community, but I do think we are coming into a period of really economic change, driven largely by a couple of things, or 2 or 3 different things. One, it's post-COVID pandemic. So the world changed as a result of the COVID pandemic. It changed our economy. It changed what certain companies are doing. It changed the way things are getting invested. That will have an impact on us. We are facing a demographic change as the baby boomers start to retire. The Generation X, the early X's, are getting very close to retirement, and then we're very fortunate with the millennials and the Z's are large cohorts for us, but it's we have got a constrained amount of population. So things around workforce are going to be very different than they had been in our previous generations. And then for us in Northern Kentucky, Northern Kentucky is a fixed amount of space, and we, having been prosperous for a long time, we've used a lot of the available industrial land up to now. And so we're going to have a different economy. We're going to have a very finite amount of workforce that we can invest or call on, and a finite amount of industrial land where we could put good jobs and good employers. And so I think these are key strategies that community leaders like yourself need to be thinking about, so that when we think about what do we want this community to be in the next generation, these are real key questions that we're going to have to answer. So with that, gosh, that was just the intro. So I'll try to go quickly through the slides. This is a fun presentation because the slides are behind me. So every couple of seconds, I'm going to have to peek behind me and just take a look at what's there. One thing I'll share just real quickly on this slide, as we re-envisioned the company and we rebranded, we went through an effort to talk about what is our why. Why do we do this work? Why do we get up in the morning? And we align on this thought. We're really driven by opportunity and prosperity for all Northern Kentuckians. And to us, that speaks to, we want all of Northern Kentucky to be successful. And in this finite world that we're looking at in the near future, we as a community cannot be successful if the urban cores lag and the suburban areas are successful, or if the urban core is successful in driving job creation and the suburban areas are not. So we really need all of Northern Kentucky to be engaged in the economy, prosperous in the economy. And so that became our way of thinking, that we want opportunity and prosperity for all of the community. And I broke your clicker. So what is it that we do as a company? So I've talked since the day one that I got here. We do two things. We do core economic development, and that means we're charged with growing the economy of the community by bringing new dollars into the community. So you want to go out and get a Mazak or a Mubia to bring new dollars into the community, so that you don't end up with a cycle where the school teacher pays the dentist, who then pays the car dealer, who then pays the banker, and you're just really recirculating dollars inside your community. That's fine, but it's really hard to grow the economy that way. Our remit is to bring new dollars into the community. We do that by working with the cities and the Fidelities and the Mazaks and the Bubias and the Bosches, legacy to come here for the first time, but then also to grow. The other thing that we do is we have a couple hundred meetings like that a year with these clients, and we learn what they're looking for. We learn what's driving their decision making, and we want to pull the insights out of that and then bring it back to the elected officials like Judge Moore here, or to community groups like this, to say, as we think about prosperity and growing the economy, here's what our key customers are looking at today and how they're making their buying decisions. Ideally, those two things work together. Community makes good decisions. We bring more customers in. We learn what customers want. We bring that back to allow the community to make more good decisions. 2022 results. I won't go into this. That's on your table in the annual report that you have in front of you. Again, what I would tell you just in short is very prosperous community. We had a great 2022, which was really not like a lot of communities coming through the end of the kind of the COVID cycle as the economy surged, but I'll let you just take a look at that on your own. Thank you. So as we think about growing the economy, just like every other business in the world, you have to know who your customer is. Some communities think every business out there is their customer. That could not be less of a true statement, just like every person is not the customer of the Toyota dealer or the Mercedes dealer or Macy's or Nordstrom or whoever it is. So you really, as a community, have to know who your key customer is. And so we worked with EY about a year and a half ago to do what's called a target industry study. And it helps us narrow down on where do we have the kind of right to play, the right assets, the right resources, the right spaces to attract certain types of industries. You see that behind me. Really what we focused in on, and you're not going to be terribly surprised by this, but advanced manufacturing. So you think about aerospace, GE Aviation GE Aerospace is in that group. Automotive, again, you think about the Bosches of the world, the Mabeas of the world. Food and flavoring manufacturing falls in that space for us. The ADMs of the world, the Tysons of the world. Then you have on the other side life sciences. So you think about in Covington companies like CTI or Gravity or PPD Labs in Highland Heights. all fall into that kind of space. You've got information technology. So we worked with a really fun company last year called StepCG that does connectivity and technology, growing very rapidly from about 10 employees pre-COVID to over 100 employees today. So that IT space, and then supply chain management and support services. And this is really important to note. This is not the big box warehouse. This is the innovation and kind of systems that run those types of things. So we did a board meeting last fall at a company called Advanced Handling Systems. They make the machinery, the equipment, the sensors, the robots that power the logistics world. And we want to try to bring those types of activities here. So as we go forward, these are the types of industries that we're going to focus on to try and drive and grow this economy. Thank you. Employment growth in Northern Kentucky. Senator Schickel, I should have pointed out as well as an elected official, was saying as we come in, you know, Boone County, the growth engine of Northern Kentucky. What is also true is Northern Kentucky is the growth engine of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. In the 5 years leading up to pre-COVID, we were the only region that was a net job creator for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. You know, in Boone County being just the epicenter of that. So I'd like to think we're going to continue to play in that space as we move forward. So the Build and Elevate Northern Kentucky Investor Campaign and Initiatives. I've talked a little bit about this before. Go ahead and take that for one more time. So Build and Elevate Northern Kentucky. We come through COVID. So COVID happens 4 years ago in 3 weeks or so now. First thought is the world's going to shut down, right? Everybody goes home. Seems like the economy's just going to grind to a halt. We immediately go into a recession and then almost immediately come out of a recession. And for us, our business surged through that. And you saw just continued growth, just like you'll see in the results there, through that period of time. As we looked at that and analyzed it, we said, all right, what do we need to bring it from a service perspective to make sure that we stay on this prosperous path? And we really identified 4 things that we thought were really important for this community. And once we identified them, we really didn't think that our company at the time was the right place for them. It ended up being that we were the entity that could do these things. So I'll point these out for you. The first is called Becoming a Data-Informed Community, or Data-Informed Decision-Making. This is about getting good data about economic, health, wealth information into the hands of the citizens of Northern Kentucky. Why is this important? Well, 1, we want to make good decisions, but 2, you know, sometimes Kentucky forgets that Northern Kentucky is actually a part of Kentucky. And you know, when you try to pull data, we're in this metro area that largely sits in Ohio, although we're a very important part of it. It's a 3-state region, so really having good data about who we are and what our economy looks like and what do place and health and wealth factors look like for us can become very hard to find. So we created a thing called the Northern Kentucky Atlas. So if you go into any web browser and you search Northern Kentucky Atlas, you will find this tool that we created in partnership with a company called Metopio. And there's over 200 data points in there now that you can search on. You can research through. You can scatter plot it. You can diagram it, and then even compare our communities versus other. I think it's 11 other key communities: Columbus, Louisville, Indianapolis, Nashville, and things of that nature. The idea is let's get good information into the hands of our citizenry. There was a chart that came out maybe 10 days ago or so, and it showed mortality across the nation. And unfortunately, Kentucky is on the wrong half of that chart, generally speaking. We really, you know, our citizens just don't live as long as what the national average is. If you dial into that though, and that chart was like red for bad, white for blue for good. Boone County, Kenton County, where there was blue as the judge's coat is there. Which is a really positive sign. And so you can dial in through the atlas and see what are some of the factors that drive that health outcome that we're getting versus what other communities maybe aren't getting. So Deliver customized workforce solutions. Again, I mentioned earlier, there's a finite amount of workforce that we have to invest as a community these days. Every company that we talk to is struggling to figure this out. Automation is going to be a big answer to that question. But for us, it's how do we bring the voice of those big companies into this conversation to make sure that programming, education, and investment matches what their needs are. I'm of the mindset that we want, fighting off a sneeze, excuse me. I'm of the mindset that we want every person who comes out, everybody that wants a job, there's a job available today because there's just so many open positions. But how do we get people into the highest value job possible for them? A job that they can earn as much money as they can possibly earn and feed a family and make a good living. And so how do we maximize that workforce asset? Things that we're thinking about in that channel. Targeted business growth, that goes directly back to the targeted industry study. And for us, that is, how do we hyper focus on those companies that are going to come to our community, be good corporate citizens, make investments, and then provide really high quality jobs. It's a really challenging thing in this industry, just how companies buy in our industry. But for us, you have to be just very laser focused on that, as opposed to this kind of, we're open for all. We're not open. We are open for all, but we don't have the right to earn everybody's business. So we want to be super specific on that. And then finally, if we do everything else right, if we have good decision making as a community and good information, if we have workforce that's ready and available, if we're targeting the right companies, we still have to have good places to put jobs. And the Northern Kentucky Port Authority, it's not a literal port, as on the river where barges or something are going to come in. It's an economic development entity that Boone, Kenton, and Campbell Counties created in the 60s that has certain powers to hold land, assemble land, help developers prepare land, with the idea being that we can have some influence so that when we have good employers coming to the community, we've got the right piece of land available for them. This is a monumental struggle across the country right now, in so much as there is there are just a finite number of really good manufacturing sites that are out there, and companies are really struggling to find places to put them. Through COVID, these manufacturers faced a really unique set of struggles in that distribution centers were growing so fast, and then the needs of a distribution center, they're just different than a manufacturer. How much soil pressure, how much water, how much sewer, how much electric that they need is generally less than what manufacturers need, and they can move much faster. So they, in fact, put a significant amount of pressure on siting manufacturing spaces. So when I talk about this, I often get the question, well, is there a manufacturing job pipeline out there? Like, if they were there, we'd be seeing them. So for the years going back to 2015, I just looked this up this morning. If you go back to 2015, there would be about $80 billion a year, 2015 through 2020. There'd be between $75 and $83 billion a year invested nationally in building manufacturing facilities, factories, expanding them or building new ones. Last year, that number topped $108 billion. So a near 50% increase. And that is a direct result of a couple of things. Most importantly is there's a war in Europe, which is destabilizing supply chains in Europe. And there was a global pandemic that completely destabilized supply chains. And these manufacturers are looking at this and saying, we have got to be closer to our customers. We cannot rely on these globally stretched supply chains, because when there is a disruption of any type, it is disastrous to our business. So you saw that 50% increase in that building and expanding manufacturing base. And so for us, we really hope that getting this port entity stood up will give us an opportunity to just really help the private sector, help developers get land ready for when these good manufacturers come to town. Thus far this year, we have had, I think as of last week, 42 RFIs around manufacturing space. So, go ahead.
I think everybody knows what an RFI is, but.
Yeah, so thank you, Judge. So it's a request for information. So basically what will happen is a company will reach out and say, we're looking at either expanding or operating a new facility, and we need these requirements. We need 50 acres of land, we need this much water, we need this much sewer, we're going to employ this amount of people, we're going to invest this amount of money. When they have all of those criteria known to them, we will help them search for spaces and where can we put them. And it's funny is our customers, their business starts on Google. Just like when you think about, hey, we want to do a trip vacation this summer. Where do we start? We start on Google, right? We start finding where do we want to go. Our clients very much do the same thing, but when they get to us, they know those requirements. And our first step is, do we have that right piece of dirt or do we have that right building for them? We've had 42 of those searches the first quarter of this year compared to 25 of the first quarter last year. So I think what I'm going to do, because I really kind of touched on this. So this data-informed community decision-making, I would encourage you, when we get done with this, hopefully not while I'm still talking, just throw in a search browser, Northern Kentucky Atlas. This is a really powerful tool. And if you want to find information on health, wealth, place, outcomes, educational information, we did a presentation last fall talking about educational outcomes, third grade reading score. And what I learned through this, third grade reading score is an incredibly important measure of future success of a student. When a kid cannot read at the third grade level, it opens the door for them to lag in education. And when they lag in education, bad outcomes like involvement with criminal justice system, use of drugs, failure to graduate from high school, pregnancy at an early age, all start to increase. And so again, now we have this potential asset for our community, which is an involved worker falling off the path. By our count last fall, there were nearly 1,000 third graders in Northern Kentucky that could not read at the third grade level. Now, that's not to say they cannot read. It means they're not reading at the expected standard of the third grader. There are 1,000 of them, near 1,000 of them. And you think about that, well, I mean, it breaks my heart because 1,000 little third graders sounds like a lot of third graders to me. But take that times every grade in the school, or every grade just post third grade, right? Now you've got 10,000 students in Northern Kentucky, 1,000 in third, 1,000 in fourth, 1,000 in fifth, that cannot read at grade level. That's the type of thing that the Atlas will illuminate for you. And then as a community, we need to start talking about it. What kind of outcomes do we want and are we looking for? And by the way, talking about things like this is not to blame the teachers and it's not to blame the school systems. They know this. They're working on this, but it's to help us bring this whole community into a conversation about these types of things so that we can find solutions.
I want to clarify what you're talking about, Lee, but what you're saying is the companies that are looking at whether to locate here or looking at Missouri or Arkansas or wherever, they are looking at that data because that's their future chain of workforce.
Yeah, they're going to look at three things. What workforce you have today, what's your population growth number, because that's your near-term workforce, and then what is your educational system turning out? What is that quality? Because that's my future workforce. And again, when you think about Mazak having been here 50 years, they want to know on that 50-year path, they're going to continue to get good workforce. So actually, I'm going to pause the presentation here. The rest of this is about the data-informed community information. I'd love to answer any questions that the group may have or make comments or thoughts.
We hear a lot about this onshore chip manufacturers. Sounds like Ohio got a big grant for that. Where do we play in that?
We Kentucky or we Northern Kentucky?
Both.
Yeah. So So there was a $10-15 billion investment in just outside of Columbus, Ohio. There was an even bigger investment in upstate New York. Intel was in Ohio. The name in New York escapes me. You need thousands of acres for a project like that. Those are monumental projects. Columbus is a city of 2 million and change or so. That will be a transformational project for that community, and in some ways the state of Ohio. It started with having a couple thousand acres available to develop on. Those manufacturers are very, very sensitive to a lot of different things: earthquake risk, supply chain risk, electrical risk, things of that nature. So for us in Northern Kentucky, it would be very difficult to track something like that because we just don't have that broad piece of space. What we're looking at, that project and projects like Ford SK, the battery deal, and then the one intervenue that went in Bowling Green, is how can we play in the kind of supply chain and technology chains of those companies, because they're just not so space demanding. I was going to say one other thing there, but it escaped my brain.
Yeah, either a question for Gary or for you, Lee. Most of us have seen the Mineola interchange and how that's being expanded. Corcorex has a lot of land around it. What kind of companies might Corcorex be hoping to bring in there?
Yeah. So they're trying to do a couple of different things. Core manufacturing would be great. We've pitched a couple of those sites on pause there because they have a site we pitched twice and got this close to winning just major projects on and did not win. So it's modestly heartburning even still to think about that. And the difference for us on that, both of those projects was just the readiness of the land. Like, they love that site, they love the access to the community, they love the workforce story, but the land was not cleared and graded just yet, and they were able to find something else and go there. So I think when you think back about that target industry study, the advanced manufacturing, I think, is core on that. I think, you might be able to find something kind of headquartersy, although that is still a little bit in flux. I'd love to see those kind of core manufacturers land out there.
So, kind of speaking about that same area, so we have the NKY High School out there.
Mm-hmm.
What has that school played into any of the economic development in the region?
I would say, one, it's early. We'd love to see them cranking out more pipeline, but it's definitely a great story for us to tell about the community being innovative in terms of developing workforce and finding, commitment to education for the community.
The fact that they won the World Robotics Competition is something that we want to promote. So
Yeah, I think
you're talking about pipeline of high-skilled workers.
Yeah, and I think Cuff Calf was 2 in that, or 3. So
They were okay.
yeah.
So Ignite Institute was #1 in the world.
You haven't mentioned the airport, so what's going on at the airport?
Yeah, so I skipped over a little bit on that target industry slide, but when you think about the airport, and it goes right into Mark's question here, you see an intersection of a lot of these sectors. So you've got aerospace. Obviously, you've got a big DHL. America's hub is there. They continue to add employment. The Amazon hub is there. They continue to add employment. You see ancillary industries coming on. So FEME, which is a maintenance repair operation, has one facility and are now building an even larger facility to do repairs on planes. FEME, in partnership with the airport, is bringing in an MRO school so they can teach the talent that they need for repair persons. By the way, if you know anybody that's young that wants a great job, those things start at like $80,000 a year, and their top people are making a number that starts with 2. So not bad work, and it's pretty cool when you're putting engines and wheels and stuff on planes. That plays a big part of it. We've worked with the airport on a project they've talked about publicly called Hangar Row. How do they create space to have more of these types of things? So we're heavily involved with the airport on that strategy, As a matter of fact, one of our key staff will travel with the airport in June to what's called the Paris Air Show. It's the biggest air show in the world to talk about. And so we'll leverage relationships with GE Aerospace, Safran that makes brakes, and other companies like that, and the airport to try to recruit people into that space. Our goal is to put those types of jobs in there while the big boxes kind of naturally fill in spaces.
Wayne has a question back here, Lee.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. That's all right, he's standing up.
That's the alarm.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Recognizing the importance of the lands in the U.S., why are we selling land in China?
You have me there. I'm not aware we're selling land to China.
Oh, yeah.
In northern Kentucky?
No,
Okay.
all over the country. Selling farms, and selling things to, military, it's well thought out, because China's they're not ignorant.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware that we've been selling land in northern Kentucky, China, but now that you say that, I do recall Virginia put some things in place around that, but that hasn't been, I'm not aware that that's been an issue for us in northern Kentucky or even Kentucky.
I don't think it is for us, but it is other places in the state.
Yeah.
Right next to military bases.
Yeah.
I think we'd sell it in any other country.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Sometimes people just sell things that pay them up.
Well, that's a real
That's
thing, right?
America, it's called capitalism.
Yeah.
Lee, I'm not sure you touched on it in your slides, but isn't it still the case that about 80% of all new jobs that are created each year are created by existing industries that are already here? The great headlines are XYZ new company coming to Boone County. That gets the headline, but you don't get the headlines when, Anderson Tool and Die or whoever it is adding 20 jobs here or 100 jobs there. But they're great paying jobs, local companies growing. We're still seeing that. aren't we?
No, that's exactly right. Again, if our remit is to grow the economy, you can't do that with one customer walking in the front door and the other one walking out the back door, just like in your own personal businesses. And that's a change. When Triad started 36 years ago, you didn't focus on the existing companies. Along the way, that changed. We definitely do. We meet with maybe 150 northern Kentucky companies a year in that space. Again, how are they doing? What do they need? What's keeping them from growing? It's a big question.
Last question there, Leroy.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I had a tour of Gateway Community College, I guess, a while back. We partnered on a grant with them, Rotary did. And one of the things they talked about how difficult it is to anticipate the training that is being made. I guess the company maybe talk about that, but they say that, they get, since the pandemic, they get requests for people who are skilled in different ways than they were before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so I guess you're working with training facilities too, or working with the companies to them, so that they, what they need, and we can try to address that.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So there's Gateway's a great partner. They want to meet the needs of those clients. And just so we meet with 150-ish companies a year in that space. And part of that workforce channel that I talked about earlier is bring that voice into those conversations so that people know what those skills look like and how that we can get the right types of training for that. Gateway will, even as we're working with new clients, is very eager. They'll build out specific programs for a new client if they can. So, and I will say this just on that workforce piece, Northern Kentucky, there's a lot of conversation out there about workforce and, perception that people don't want jobs. And I'm sure there's people that don't want jobs. Northern Kentucky is in a very different space. We have, when you look at what's called everybody focuses on unemployment rate. Unemployment rate was 3.5% last month. That's a fantastic number. For Northern Kentucky, we look at what's called labor participation rate. And simple way to think of it is labor participation rate is everybody that's above the age of 16, everybody above the age of 16 who's not in school, institutionalized, in the military, and maybe a couple other carve-outs. What percentage of those are going to work every day? Our number is about 67, 68%. It's a very, very high number. The highest numbers you'll see for a community in the United States, Salt Lake City is 70, 71. Boise, because they got hot in the pandemic, will be 70. The US average is 62, 63%. Kentucky's average is 54%, something like that. So we're significantly above both of those US and Kentucky number. And so when we think about workforce, it's not so much, there are pockets where people could be higher employment, but really we need more people to go to work every day because we're deploying nearly 70% of them already. So, well, that's it. Well, thank you for allowing me to be here.